Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mandani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists. And
Bill Maher just launched another blistering rant, and this time his targets were AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Zohar Mamdani. This wasn't casual annoyance. It sounded more like a full-scale political intervention. Maher, a lifelong Democrat, came off like the only sober person left at a party that spiraled out of control. While everyone else is lining up shots at 2 in the morning, he's standing there waving his arms, begging them to slow down before something breaks. He looks at AOC and her rising socialist ally, and seems to be saying the same thing over and over. Stop. Just stop. Not because it's edgy or provocative, but because it's politically reckless. And, predictably, they're doing the exact opposite. Instead of reassessing, they're digging in at AOC recently snapped back at critics, including Maher, using the familiar defense. You just don't know him yet. If you'd actually meet the guy, you'd understand. It's the political version of a dating app pitch. Swipe right on democratic socialism and hope chemistry magically fixes everything. Here's where the irony kicks in. Suddenly, AOC is calling for open minds and face-to-face conversations. Dialogue matters now. Listening is essential now. Yet that generosity rarely seems to extend to Donald Trump or conservatives in general. When it comes to them, the door stays firmly shut. So her new role as the champion of understanding feels less like growth and more like selective empathy. Even Democrats in the middle are starting to notice. Eyebrows are lifting. Doubts are creeping in. And the party that once prided itself on balance is watching one of its loudest voices preach openness. Only when it's convenient.
The skeptics, though, in the party will want to keep him at arm's distance. Some who have some problems with him, even some fellow New Yorkers in the swing districts outside the city.
Get to know him. Get to know him. You know, this is not about having any kind of hard line, I think.
Maher doesn't ease into it. He goes straight for one of his favorite reality checks. South Korea versus North Korea. Same peninsula, same history, completely different outcomes. One side lights up at night, like Times Square. The other looks like someone forgot to pay.
That if anybody is skeptical, I would say get to know him. And once you get into a room with him, kick the tires yourself and make your own assessment instead of just kind of making assessments from what you may see on television. If you have the ability to meet someone in person, you should meet him.
Maher keeps hammering the point home. Bernie Sanders, AOC, and Zohar Mamdani aren't just Democrats with edgy ideas. They openly call themselves democratic socialists. Different label, different ideology, and they're not hiding it. Maher's frustration isn't about semantics. It's about honesty. You can't sell voters one brand while pushing another agenda. These aren't mild tweaks to the party platform. They're fundamental shifts. And Maher makes it clear. That distinction matters, especially when the consequences aren't theoretical. And apologies. No walkbacks. No pretending it's all the same thing. They've chosen the label. They own it. And Maher insists voters deserve to know exactly what that choice means.
Kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations.
Maher says the real problem is that most voters don't even notice the brand switch. But then he lands his cleanest punch. The very politicians who rail nonstop against capitalism owe everything they have to it. Bernie's best-selling books, AOC's media fame and brand deals, their massive social followings and cultural influence. None of that exists without a capitalist system rewarding attention, personality, and dissent. Capitalism didn't silence them. It made them famous. Maher's point is brutal in its simplicity. In real socialism, you don't become a celebrity by attacking the system. The system attacks back. And when it's done, you don't get canceled online. You disappear entirely. That contradiction, Maher argues, isn't a small detail. It's the whole story.
Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's socialism for the 21st century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century or any century, a mess. It turned one of Latin America's richest countries into one of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening.
That's the contradiction Maher finds completely exhausting. The loudest voices declaring capitalism broken just happen to be the ones thriving most comfortably inside it. Now, Maher isn't pretending capitalism is perfect. He admits it's messy, uneven, and often infuriating. But when you stack it up against socialism, with its near-perfect record of failure, capitalism starts to look like the stable partner in a toxic relationship. You've seen.
Is taking place when we have an administration in Washington which every day is moving us toward an authoritarian society.
This is America, New York City. Don't let them tell you any different. Don't let them tell you that we are the exception. We are the rule. And we set the bar for America. I'm talking to you, Donald Trump.
Let our words ring out so loud tonight that Andrew Cuomo can hear them in his $8,000 a month apartment. New York is not for sale.
And the silence from the moderate majority is deafening. That silence isn't neutral, it's permission. When a party refuses to rein in its extremes, those extremes don't just influence the party. They become the party. Meanwhile, the data is practically screaming. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts that Trump carried. Every single one of them was a moderate. Not one Democratic socialist made that list. Think tanks studied the results and reached the same conclusion over and over again. Move to the center. Even the New York Times, the so-called cathedral of liberal thought, admitted the extremists were wrong and the middle was the winning strategy. So did the DNC course correct? Of course not. They treated that advice like ingredients in a blender, hit max, and chugged a chaos smoothie. Moderates continue to be sidelined, while socialist messaging gets amplified. The party isn't openly abandoning capitalism, but it's clearly flirting with socialism, sending late-night texts like, "Hey, you up?" while pretending it's just a phase. The result is a party drifting further from the voters who actually decide elections. Instead of listening to what worked, they're doubling down on what sounds good online. And Maher's frustration comes from one simple reality. Elections aren't won on Twitter, they're won in the middle. Ignore that long enough, and eventually the bill comes due.
If the party didn't shift to the center, we will get torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I
Maher
right,
warns
lady?
that putting ideology ahead of electability is the fastest way to lose elections. He points out that the DNC's worst losses didn't come from playing it safe. They came from going all in on woke theatrics, symbolic crusades, and fringe priorities that excite activists but confuse or alienate everyday voters. Instead of focusing on bread and butter issues people actually vote on, the party keeps chasing applause from the loudest corners of the internet. And Maher's message is blunt. Moral posturing doesn't win elections. Votes do.
Wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar. Democratic socialism is like a dating profile. Things look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week.
Voters aren't looking for a political TikTok performance. They want steadiness, balance, and reassurance that a party isn't being run by people who confuse Twitter with real life. And Maher's point lands because it cuts across party lines. Americans on the left, right, and center aren't begging for a revolution. They're looking for stability. They don't want socialism. They want solutions that actually work. Yet the DNC keeps behaving like that friend who ignores every red flag and still wonders, why does this keep happening to me? Maher drives home one final, unavoidable truth. Socialism doesn't fail quietly. It fails loudly and spectacularly. It doesn't fade out. It crashes. History shows the same pattern again and again. Shortages, runaway inflation, economic collapse, and mass exodus. Just look at Venezuela. Nearly 8 million people have fled the country amid economic and humanitarian disaster, a level of migration larger than many wartime crises. So when AOC argues that New York is the exception, Maher flips the script. If New York is the rule, then brace yourself. Because if socialism is the rule, the outcome won't be prosperity, it will be collapse. Then Maher circles back to Bernie Sanders' home state of Vermont, where the theory collided with reality. On paper, single-payer healthcare sounds amazing. In speeches, it's inspiring. But when Vermont attempted its own statewide system, Green Mountain Care, the plan was scrapped before it ever launched. Why? The projected costs were massive, the tax increases would have been severe, and officials concluded the economic disruption would be too great. As Maher asked the question no one on the progressive wing seems eager to answer. If a small, well-positioned state like Vermont couldn't make it work, how exactly is New York, a massive, complex, and incredibly expensive metropolis, supposed to succeed where Vermont failed? School. Maher's final message is unflinching. Democratic,